which industry will be most affected by blockchain?
It's a toss-up between conventional finance and big tech. Like every conventional bank, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Citigroup, Fidelity, Blackstone, BlackRock, that they're affected, right? If you're taking $100 trillion of bonds with a negative yield and you swap the $100 trillion of bonds into Bitcoin, which is appreciating, I mean, there's no way to describe that as anything other than a multi-trillion-dollar digital transformation of bonds to Bitcoin. And, if you look at traditional finance, there are massive businesses that are all built around wrapping fixed income instruments and bond instruments and providing management services. So I think that clearly that's going to be affected. But the other side of this is big tech. Bitcoin is worth $1 trillion to Apple. Bitcoin is worth $1 trillion to Facebook. If Facebook is $1 trillion company, and what's in the app? Your digital relationships and digital photos and digital videos are in the app. Well, what if digital property is in the app? What happens when Facebook has $1 trillion worth of money on deposit in the app from 1 billion people? So Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, all of those companies, especially Google, Facebook, and Apple, they're the obvious candidates to become $1 trillion big tech banks, fintech banks. So this is pretty compelling to them because, how many analysts are walking around with the next idea for how Apple adds $1 or $2 or $3 trillion to its market cap, right? Not many other ideas.
Well, I wrote about how Apple should be a buyer of Bitcoin maybe 6 months ago. They've got $200 billion of capital on their balance sheet. How can they spend all that money? They should create more innovation, inspire people, buy Bitcoin, and do what you're doing.
And I get that, by the way, and I agree with that, but that's a strategy that anybody with capital can pursue. So if you want to make $10 billion, you just buy $10 billion of Bitcoin and wait for it to double, right? It's a very simple strategy. And as large institutions get comfortable with Bitcoin as an asset class, then they're going to pursue that strategy, right? But my idea or my thought with Apple is we will get to a point in this world where 8 billion people will have a mobile phone. There's guys, I guess 6 billion now, 5 to 6 billion. And those mobile phones will be controlled probably by either the iOS or the Android operating system. So you're staring at who are the big mobile players? It's Google and Apple, split the world between them. And then Facebook is that compelling app on top of them. So those are the big three. We will get to the world where everybody wants to carry their property on their phone. And so if I give you $1 million and I say to you, invest it in something that you can give to your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren in 100 years. A building, land, gold, silver, a stock, a bond. What is that something? Well, I don't want to take any of that risk. I just want the pure money. And the answer is, okay, put $1 million of Bitcoin on the thing. And how are you going to handle that? A mobile device. And how are you going to secure it? It's going to be some combination of Face ID, multi-signature Face ID, or biometrics across multiple mobile devices with multi-factor authentication. And that's how you're going to move it. And that's how you're going to custody it. And that means that the iCloud, what's in the iCloud now, right? Your videos, your photos, your documents, and your communications. What's not in the iCloud now? Your money. What happens when $100 trillion gets slurped out of 20th century property, which is land, real estate, gold, bonds, securities? What happens when $100 trillion gets slurped into digital property? It's got to land in the iCloud or the equivalent of the Android cloud or in Facebook. And if none of those three step up, Dan, then it's going to be Square and PayPal. And then one day Square will be $1 trillion company, right? So. And it's going to be a little war between them. And maybe, they'll be maneuvering between the exchanges and the apps, et cetera. That's the opportunity now, and it's big. It's the future of big tech, because the mobile wave has chapters, right? Mobile photos, mobile video, mobile or digital photos, digital video, digital books, digital maps, digital relationships, digital education, digital property. Digital property is that last chapter, and it's the big chapter, because digital property is worth somewhere between 100 trillion and $200 or $300 trillion. So the question is, who in the next decade is going to control, manage, program the digital property? And will that be Apple, or will that be Facebook, or will that be Square? That's the opportunity, and that dwarfs digital maps and digital music and digital books. And I don't think any of them quite have their heads around it. Probably the most sophisticated entrepreneur in the space right now is Jack Dorsey. PayPal knows they got to do something. They don't get leapfrogged. A lot of the guys in the crypto space, they're still busy trading cryptos. But you see, the value is not in trading 250 or 500 different crypto coins. Mm-hmm. The value is in slurping $50 trillion out of bonds into Bitcoin, and slurping $50 trillion or $100 trillion out of real estate. Here's how you know you've got to the right place. When the rich 70-year-old that has $100 million and is thinking about how to give it to his grandchildren, when that person says, I guess I should put $50 million of it into Bitcoin because that's a much better idea than owning a building in Manhattan. And it is a better idea, by the way. Property tax, in Florida is 2% interest a year. If you take $100 million and you buy property or buy a house in Florida, you're paying $2 million a year. Okay, well, figure it out. In 30 years, you lose your property. Most property has a high maintenance expense. And so what you want is a low tax load, low maintenance. You can't put $100 million into a yacht and give it to your grandkids. The maintenance cost on a yacht is 10% a year. So what can I put the money into that is low maintenance, that's going to appreciate? And the only idea people have right now is diversified portfolio of securities, hence the ETF boom. But at the end of the day, you're holding a diversified portfolio of securities. You've got employment risk, tax risk, execution risk, securities risk, custody risk, counterparty risk, all sorts of things. And so I'm not suggesting that Bitcoin or digital property replaces ETFs and securities, because you're always going to want to own a basket of companies if you are an investor. But if you are a saver, and you were thinking about buying land or gold or some other very scarce asset for 100 years, digital property in the form of Bitcoin is by far the best idea we've come up with in the century. And so the real opportunity here is not keep reinventing Bitcoin. The real opportunity is for Apple Computer simply to sell at $10,000 of Bitcoin to 100 million people. And that's a big idea. And if 100 million people have $10,000 sitting in the iCloud, then you just became the world's biggest, most profitable bank in the history of mankind, right? That's just sitting and waiting out there for someone to grab.